Welcome to this week's sermon reflection time. We were in Revelation chapter 7 this past Sunday as we explored multitudes. And Revelation 7 is this great contrast between what John hears versus what John sees. And this is true for you and me as well. We grow up hearing a lot of scripts, a lot of tapes that roll in the back of our head. It's often called culture, right? That enculturates us with certain ideas, certain ideals, moral values, religion, spirituality, all sorts of different things. And that is a mixed bag. Some of it is good, some of it's not so good. Some of it gives us resiliency for life, some of it provides us fear and anxiety. And so John has those same things given to him by his particular culture, just as you and I do. And so as we come to Revelation chapter 7, here we are, this beginning part where 144,000 are sealed. Mostly in our culture, people who are familiar with this, who haven't read Revelation chapter 7, they're familiar about it through various subcategories of the Christian faith, often called cults, right? And so Jehovah's Witnesses are the most popular around this particular number, believing that there's a certain number of elect individuals, people who are chosen by God who will be in heaven. And they believe in the 144,000. And that's a very defined number. And I think a few years back, they decided to revise that and make it a little bit more symbolic. But that's still very problematic. One is that that's not a large number. Two is this idea that this is not actually what happens in Revelation 7. John hears this number. He hears that God's going to seal 144,000 of the chosen people of God. But when John looks, this is where verse 9, after this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And so this great multitude isn't from a particular culture, a particular religion, a particular ethnicity, a particular language, a particular people group. This transcends all of humanity. And the piece that I did not get into on Sunday, because there's so many layers here in this text, is this next part that is mentioned here. Robed in white, with palm branches in their hand, they cry out, salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb. Right. And that goes back to chapter 5, which we were in last week, right? That John hears about the Lion of the tribe of Judah when he turns and sees is a slain and slaughtered lamb, right? And so this same imagery carries in here to chapter 7. And as we see, as we come down here into verse 14, it's, Sir, you are the one who knows who these people are. Who are these people robed in white? Where do they come from? In verse 13. Verse 14, you're the one who knows. They're the ones who've come out of the great ordeal. Oftentimes it's translated the great tribulation. Right. And so those of you who are familiar with like fundamentalism and like the end times and the rapture and all those kinds of things, that word tribulation means something in that particular tradition. We mainliners don't believe that narrative of Revelations or the end of times. And this word that is here in Greek can mean ordeal, situation, tribulation. Basically, it's referencing something that is a negative suffering experience, right? They're the ones who've come out of this great trial, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And the reference here is really both to a sense of purity, but also that purity that is by fire, that purity that is by tribulation, that purity that comes from suffering. And so it's really in reference to the martyrs, to persecution, to those who have painfully lost their lives and loved ones because they have been targeted for a wide variety of reasons, including their faith and values, right? And so for this reason, verse 15, they are before the throne of God. They're before the throne of God, right? I find that interesting because it seems a reference that maybe there's lots of folks in the celestial realm who aren't just before the throne of God, but these particular ones are. And they worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne, it goes back to the ruler, in this case, God, but also keeps coming back to the slaughtered lamb. And so these folks who have washed their robes in the blood of the lamb, as well as the lamb itself who's been slaughtered and slain. And then you can see the blessing that is here. They will hunger no more, thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. And you have this theme throughout Scripture that God is the God of the oppressed. God is the God of the marginalized. God is the one who comes alongside of those who are suffering, who are in pain and torture. And so constantly throughout Scripture, we keep that group throughout history has always been some sort of slave class for the most part. People who are struggling with hunger, who are thirsty all the time, who are out in the scorching sun doing horrible, hot, painful work. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. And he will guide them to springs of the water of life. And then this beautiful image, and going off of Mother's Day weekend, right? This very motherly image, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Love this text. As you can tell, I love the book of Revelations. It is a book about worship, is a book about allegiance. As I mentioned a couple Sundays back, we talk about these end times, but that really got hijacked by Hal Lindsey in the 1970s, hijacked by the Left Behind movement. That goes all the way back to the late 1800s and that whole fundamentalist movement that really read the book of Revelations wrong, read the book of Daniel wrong, read the Matthew chapter 25 wrong, read a lot of things wrong and conflated a lot of crazy things together. And really, it's about the ends of time, meaning the purpose of history, where all of this is leading. What is the end goal? How does it all consummate? How does God get to God's created end and goal with creation? And so it ends the way that the Bible begins, right? It ends with this beautiful image of perfection, a new heaven, a new earth, a new creation, a new Jerusalem, and God is right there in the center of it all. I want to move now into, we've been talking about how we think about these things. I want to move into how we feel. And we've been for many months now talking about our emotions charts, our feelings wheels, all those kinds of things. I want to move a little bit broader than that today and get into the wellness wheel. And just like the feelings charts and all those kinds of things, there's multiple versions of a wellness wheel out there. They have similarities and overlaps as well as a lot of differences. There's a lot to learn from one particular wellness wheel to another. I've chosen this particular one for today because I want us to begin to say, like, how do we integrate what we think? How do we integrate this word of scripture in our lives into ourselves? How do we incarnate it? How do we enflesh it into our lives? And so this wellness wheel has particular aspects of our lives. There's the emotional component, the physical component, the intellectual component, spiritual component, the occupational component, the social component. And so as we've been in the feelings and emotions chart, right? Like we start with a section up here, and how does this integrate with our emotions? How does it make us feel? How does it help us find regulation in our lives? How does it help us deal with pain and suffering? How does it help us cultivate hope in our lives? As well as moving into the physical. Revelation chapter 7 is very physical, right? Talking about hunger and thirst and scorching scorching sun and all of those things. People are bowing down, right? So very physically involved movements that happen in the book of Revelations. There are tears, right? All of these aspects of who we are. There's an intellectual component, a curiosity, and a critical mind aspect of all of this. And how do we think through all these things? What is there to learn and to discover here, right? What goals and milestones might we set based on Revelation 7? What does it make us think about? As we get into the spiritual, how does this celebrate certain beliefs and values and aspects of our culture, as well as how does it challenge and stretch those things and ask us to re-believe and reform in a new way? What does it mean for us to engage a text like this, not only intellectually, but also quite spiritually and mindfully, to allow the contemplation, the reflection to take place, as we often do on Wednesdays with our sacred space time? What things are there to help us to locate joy in our lives, as well as locate the places of care and concern? As we move into the occupational, this is the place where we begin to figure out, like, how does this integrate into our sense of who we are and our sense of call, our sense of purpose, right? Our vocation, our calling on this earth, right? And that involves play, involves learning, involves our routines and rhythms, and chores and jobs, our hobbies, our interests. And then also the social. How does this help make us aware of others? In Revelation 7, as we move from our own culture and religion and biases and fears and judgments and comfort zone into a world of multitudes and a world of many nations and a world of all the tribes and the world of all of the differences and diversity, and how do we intend to experience all of that? How do we tolerate those differences in our lives? How do we celebrate those differences in our lives? How do we bridge the world of conflict, knowing that there's a God who wants to wipe away every tear from every eye? And so all of this is part of our wellness. It's part of our wholeness. It's part of our well-being. It's part of being human and integrating the whole self in an incarnated, embodied, enfleshed reality. Because that's what God is after. God's not just after this. God's after about integrating the whole self, the wholeness of us, the holiness of us. And so as you're beginning to think about, how do I integrate this into my life? So we move from this place of the head into the place of the heart and the whole, and now into the place of hands. What are we actually going to do? I want you to pick two places around the wheel where you're going to take aspects, themes, values, a word from Revelation 7 and apply it to two aspects here. Maybe it's the physical, maybe it's the intellectual, maybe it's the spiritual, maybe it's the occupational, the social, or the emotional, and say, I'm going to take these two steps, these two actions this week. My hope is that you will consider doing that. If you do, send me a note, justin@gracecolorado.com. You can also comment right here on YouTube. We would love to hear from you. If you have my cell number, I'm not going to give it out on the video, but if you have that, feel free to text it to me. I would love to hear about how you're integrating this sermon, this text, into your life. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for this sermon reflection. Hope to see you tomorrow for our CareCast. Thanks everyone.